People ask me, why have you been climbing mountains for the last 15 years? Is it the exhilaration, they say? Is it the heady delights of visiting remote and inaccessible places where the hand of man is neither visible nor intrusive? Or the spiritual solitude? Or is it simply the physical exertion of overcoming fatigue to reach a seemingly unattainable goal? Well, yes to all that, and something more too. It gets you out of the house.
The way I see it is this. Life's a precipice. You thought I'd sink to the bottom of the pile,
but I prefer to rise. Acclimatized, I wanna make your dreams come true.
The way you do it is this. You know what hot trouble is. It's you.
Hey, wake up, open your eyes. You have to aim big and wide, aim high, so come on.
I'm looking at you.
Dear Scottish television, my wife and I tuned into your so-called Munro show, expecting to hear a bit of sense about mountains from somebody sensible. Imagine our horror when we were confronted by a bottle-blonde harpy with spindly shanks. Come on, Scottish, you can do better than that. Well, yes, I suppose it might come as a bit of a surprise to you that somebody like myself has loved the mountains for many years and claims them with a passion. However, the more traditional image of the mountaineer is somebody like this. This is Ross, our researcher, who will be helping us out throughout the series. And as you can see, he has all the traditional attributes. The beard, an absolute essential. The tousled hair, an old bobbly jacket. Seen some action there, I think. Probably, about 70 or 80 years old there. And one or two interesting odours. Thank you, Ross. Up until recently, mountaineering has been very much the domain of craggy, hardy mountain men who've conquered peaks and made the wilderness their own. But in fact, more and more people, with or without beards, are taking to the hills encouraged by the goal of the Munros. That is, the 277 peaks in Scotland over 3,000 feet. So named after Sir Hugh Munro, a keen climber, who 100 years ago published a full list of the mountains in the now famous Munro Tables. Of course, in Scotland we're very lucky in having hundreds of mountains under 3,000 feet that are shapely and gorgeous and should be ascended at all costs. However, since this is the Munro show, we'll be dealing mainly with Munros. We'll be skipping up Beinn Narnain in the Arrochar Alps. We walk the Five Sisters Ridge. There's rugged Teallach in Wester Ross and a terrifying walk along the Eagach. Plus a climb up shapely Beinn Cruachan and the ultimate Munro, the inaccessible pinnacle. But first, mighty Liathach in the beautiful region of Torridon.
As it is written, it is pronounced Liathach, but I know that old native Gaelic speakers from Torridon sometimes pronounce it Liathach, where the T in the middle should be a G.
Well, we're here in Torridon to climb one of Scotland's most picturesque and photogenic mountains, Liathach. Yes, that's the mountain that you always see reflected in Loch Awe behind me on the cover of those calendars you get from the grocer at Christmas. Liathach, it will say, in snowy winter's garb, or Liathach, brushed by the late evening sunshine. Where is it? But today, of course, it's Liathach in bogging, miserable drizzle. However, we're still going to climb it with a song in our heart, because those nice men and women at the Met Office assure us all this cloud will be lifting by lunchtime and we should get some sort of a view. Now, Liathach is one of three very exciting mountains in the Torridon region, the other two being Ben Alligin and Beinn. Liathach itself is two Munros joined by a rather scary ridge, the highest of the two peaks being 3,456 feet. We have quite a steep ascent to get onto the ridge. Liathach means the grey one. It's no relation, we just look a bit similar today. And since it's so wet and unpleasant, I think we'd probably better start. Now, it's quite reassuring on such a steep ascent to have a well-trodden path. And this one sticks close to a gorge with a dramatic tumbling burn. Well, the rather intimidating thing about Liathach is the way it presents this rather impenetrable fortress of rock behind me. However, there's a way up it. It ingeniously takes us over that crest of rock and we get right up on top of the ridge. The way it's looking today, though, I wouldn't be surprised if there's pterodactyls circling up there. Well, all right, Right, the Met Office were right. It's time to say goodbye to Mr. Cagoule because we've burst up through the cloud into clearer air and we're getting a fantastic view across to the ocean and also to Beinn. Strange, it only has one Munro and yet the ridge is about twice as long as Eagach. Well, it's exaggerating a bit, but it's certainly longer. And there are two here. Why should this be? I don't know. I didn't make up the tables. It's very busy up here today. We've been passed by a party of small school children, which is rather demoralising. So even though that top might well be like Grange Hill, we're still going for it. It's in cloud at the moment, but we have faith. Well, we've made it to the top of the first Munro, Spinny and Liathach. It's taken us 2¼ hours and the views are staggeringly beautiful. And the views you'll enjoy for the entire ridge walk, every rise providing a new and more exciting perspective on this magnificent mountain. The only daunting prospect is that lying between you and the next Munro is a ridge that is definitely not for the faint-hearted. Now, if you like to keep your hands in your pockets when climbing Munros, then perhaps Eagach is not the one for you. No matter which route you take along the ridge, you're going to have to use those hands and scramble at some point. But on a clear day, it's fantastically good fun. In poor conditions, however, this is what separates the casual hill walker from the mountaineer. It may look simple in sunshine, but one false step on an icy, gale-swept day could spell disaster. All along the ridge you'll discover dramatic jutting pieces of rock, and although you may not feel like a detour with such a huge walk still stretching before you, they provide a quite incredible view of the wild lands rolling away behind Eagach. For the geologists amongst you, Eagach is made up of quartzite scree on top of Torridonian sandstone, which is reputed to be amongst the oldest rock in the world, 1,000 million years old in fact. Just imagine something older than a Radio 1 DJ. There's a choice between the bypass path or the route along the rocky crest of the ridge, but since the path cuts into steep, slippery, grassy banks, make your choice based on weather conditions and whether or not you can handle the exposure of airy rock scrambling. Whichever route you choose, it will take your breath away. Well, this is us just coming up to the last of the Amphasaran and pinnacles. That's all that lies between us and the relative safety of the second and last Munro. And we've not been chickens this time, we've stuck exactly to the top of the ridge, because quite frankly the path that bypasses it is as vertigo-inducing and as exposed as the ridge has been, so I think you're probably safer clinging to the rock. This is the first time I've actually done these Munros with the ridge between them and Eagach, and I would not recommend it as a first Munro. It's scary, it's very dangerous, and you do need a bit of mountaineering experience. But after the pinnacles, you can relax again. There's no more scrambling or whimpering with fear, just a final short pull up to the last Munro, and views you will never forget. started this climb today, it was hardly worth getting out of the car. The weather was so miserable, but now look at it. So always listen to the weather forecast, or you could waste a glorious day like this one. We're on the last Munro, it's Mullach an Ran, 3,358 feet, and because we've done this ridge walk east to west, we're now enjoying the late evening sun sparkling behind me on Loch Torridon. You can also see the hills of Skye beyond. And this is a lovely mountain, Beinn Alligin. It's a bit dark just now. I did that in winter and it was superb. It has the famous horns of Alligin. Come this way, let me show you more. That's the coastline going up past Arrochar and Gairloch. You can just make out Loch Awe behind me. And if you come further round, you can see Slioch and Teallach possibly poking through there. Now you get a superb view of the whole Beinn ridge. And you can also see where we've just been. Ta-da! Liathach in all its glory. Beyond that, Aonach and the hills of Loch Awe. Round here on the other side of Loch Torridon, falling off as I go, is Beinn. It's a lovely little mountain. It's not a Munro, but well worth doing. Well, we're just going to drop down a gully now, not literally obviously, but walking and taking great care, and emerge beside the youth hostel. It's been a fantastic day. The walk's not over obviously, coming down is sometimes harder than going up, but it's blustery, it's cold, and I'm looking forward to my tea. It's from Arrochar at the head of Loch Long that we start the walk up two of Scotland's most accessible Munros today, Mhaim and Narnain. They form part of what's known as the Arrochar Alps. It's an area where many fledgling Munroists first started taking their faltering steps into the hills, myself included incidentally. And I suppose the reason for that is that the accessibility is marvellous. It's less than an hour's drive from Glasgow, and there's good public transport in the shape of buses to bring you here. It's a sea level start, and you can see how well used the car park at the base is, but that's because this is the access point for a number of very well used hills. Now the path takes you up through a corridor like break in the trees, and very steeply I should say.
I have never heard the name of this mountain pronounced by a Gaelic speaker, but if Narnain is one word, it must be pronounced in Gaelic Narnain.
Well, the first part of the route is relatively easy, though very moist. It's almost like walking up through a river. It takes you through a piece of forest, which might not be here when you do it, because they're clearing the trees as we speak. And from here you get a marvellous view of the grim hamlet that is Arrochar, and you can still make out the lovely, charming village sounds. What's that? Oh, it's a Sunday Post reader composing a letter to the editor about a lack of toilet facilities. One thing's for sure, you're certainly not going to lose the path here because it's terribly well constructed around some big concrete blocks. It would make the M25 blush. There's conflicting theories on the origin of the concrete blocks. One is that they're the foundations of a small railway and the other is they carried a water pump. Another yet suggests they were part of a construction to get tools and materials up the hill. The strange sticks you see there are tree protectors where the Forestry Commission are planting in the newly cleared areas. Keeps the deer from eating the saplings. Well, once you're off that huge dual carriageway, things start to become a little bit more enjoyable. And the main drag takes you up southwest towards the Cobbler, more of that later. However, our route now takes us straight up this hillside and onto Narnain. This is where you get a fantastic view of Loch Long behind me, and the MOD really appreciate its length for firing torpedoes up it. And incidentally, if during a 4-minute warning, should that dreadful day come and you've been planning to take to the hills, don't do it in the Arrochar Alps, because here we're only a few miles away from Europe's largest nuclear weapons dump. You've never heard Sir Harry Seacombe sing about that in Highway when he's in the Highlands, have you? It's from this point that the walk starts to become more interesting. If the path was crowded until now, you might shake off a few people as they head off for other peaks. And of course there's the anticipation of the views still to come. Now it's fantastically rewarding because obviously the higher you get up this path, the more the views open out. And you get this superb view of Loch Lomond and Ben Lomond behind it. and the other hills that surround it. But the one thing I would say about Beinn Narnain is it's a mountain of false summits. Every time you come up to a rise and think you're going to glimpse the top, no, there's another rise behind it. In fact, it's been known to make many a hard Munros go, och. But you certainly won't go, och, when you catch your first glimpse of the Cobbler, the first hill I climbed, incidentally, aged 16, and still a firm favourite for those starting out hill walking. But never fear, Beinn Narnain is no disappointment in comparison. Well, this is the real top of Beinn Narnain, 3,006 feet. And how could Scotland look more beautiful than today? A light dusting of early snow in the high tops. You can see behind me the Arrochar Alps and see just how rewarding they are in their accessibility. This is Bheinn. Now that's a mountain that you would normally do in tandem with Beinn Narnain just to make a superb day out. And the views just carry on and on. You can see all the way across to Mull and Jura. And this, I think, is an example of the absurdity of Munro bagging. 6 feet over 3,000 feet that makes Beinn Narnain a Munro, but Ben Arthur, the cobbler there, is 200 feet short of it, so it doesn't get included in the list. But if you come all the way up here and you miss doing that, then I think you're mad. Sisters are here in the climber and walker's paradise of Kintail. No, that's not the Nolans stopping over at the Cluny Inn for a night on their way to a gig at Portree Town Hall. It is in fact a very famous ridge walk containing two of Scotland's most scenic Munros. It's a long hard day and we've started ludicrously early, which is why some of us are so grumpy.
The name Five Sisters is never used in Gaelic. It's called Evain Vor, the big mountain, to distinguish it from Liathach, the long mountain across on the other side of Glencoe. As far as I know, nobody in Kintail ever says anything except Sgurr, which ought to be spelled U with a Grav accent above it, R-A-I-N. Sgurr the score of the black kist or chest. Probably the Kintail person will say Sgurr na ciste duya.
Excuse me. Well, because you step off the busy road straight onto that climb, there is pain involved. I'm sorry, I cannot lie to you, there is pain. But as we've learned in the Munro show, a steep climb means heights gained very quickly. And should you stop for just a moment to cough up some phlegm or something, at least you can appreciate the South Glencoe Ridge in all its glory and the very famous saddle behind me. That's the craggy one beside the pointy one. Oh, work out for yourself, get a map. Oh, so grumpy. Well, this is our route. Again, the tops are in blue and the Munros in white. We start and finish on the 887, but rather far apart, as you can see. It's always a problem in ridge walking. Well, here we are on the ridge at last, and I think this is probably my favourite sort of mountaineering, ridge walking. You do all the hard slogging first thing in the morning and then just enjoy a lovely airy walkway for the rest of the day. And this is a really classic ridge walk, the Five Sisters of Kintail, although it's actually 6 peaks in total, but only 2 are afforded Munro status. Behind me you can see the first non-Munro peak, And then in the distance there, with its head slightly in the cloud, that's the last Munro, Sgurr. But oh heavens, there's a long way to go before we reach that yet, because we've worked out in terms of vertical feet that we climb and descend, there's going to be over 10,000 feet. These hills are perhaps at their most spectacular when an early dusting of snow throws their contours into sharp relief and treats the hill walker to sights like this. But no matter what the season, the hills are spectacular, turning from emerald green in spring through the blues of summer to the purples and browns of autumn. Well, that's actually the summit cairn of Sgurr na Cíiste, the Hill of the Black Chest, at 3,370 feet. But if you come a few yards west of it, you get a much better vantage point to look all around you. For instance, behind me you can see Glenshiel and Loch Awe, and across there is the South Glenshiel Ridge, a magnificent walk when you can take in 7 Munros in one day. I did it in June, and I would recommend doing it at that time of year if you want to give yourself lots of time and lots of light. We can see across to the rough bounds of Knoydart. I think you can just make out Sgurr na Cíiste and unfortunately Larvins and Cloud there. But just to the right of that is the Cruachan Ridge and the Saddle. And further round is the magnificent Beinn. Then there's the hills that lead over to Glenelg. And right round to beautiful romantic Loch Awe and the road to the Isles. Well, not bad today. This is 5 hours since we started, and here we are on the second and the last Munros. This is the highest of the two, Sgurr at 3,505 feet. But don't be misled into thinking it's all over when you get here. It's still quite a long way to go yet. In fact, there's another 2 tops to do, but they're not Munros. We're not going to do the last one. We're going to descend after this next top and come down, which will bring us down onto the road 5 miles away from where we started. And since I don't fancy my chances hitchhiking with a purple runny nose and a multicoloured jacket, we've rather sensibly left a car down there. Now, the marvellous thing about doing this ridge from east to west is you end up with this picture postcard of a view, Loch Awe, the ocean and the islands beyond. It's not just climbers and hill walkers packing out the mountains these days, because all sorts of leisure activities are launching themselves from the crags. But what seems to be irritating the traditional mountaineers the most is the latest sport that dare not speak its name in a bothy: mountain biking. Okay, now you are 2 of the pioneers of mountain biking in Scotland, and I want to know why you do this. Why take these things up onto the hill?
Basically, I do it because it's fun. First bought a bike so I could ride to the bottom of hills and then walk up them, and it was so much fun riding the bike I gave up walking up them. And I don't know, it's good fun basically.
Fun, is that your reason?
Yes, fun and fitness as well, actually.
There's quite a lot of controversy. For starters, walkers are complaining that mountain bikers are ruining their enjoyment of the hills, and landowners are specifically complaining that you are doing much more damage to the path than walkers ever do. How do you reply to that?
Well, quite straightforward. We just don't agree with it. Yes, you often hear a lot of people saying, well, you've just left a tyre track down the middle of that nice muddy path. Well, that nice muddy path was created by people tramping their boots all through
20
it.
boot marks,
yes.
Where you have 1 tyre track, so they're making equal amount of damage. It's just the boot marks have always been there.
Tell me what's different about them to normal bikes, because I mean, to the lay person they might look fairly similar apart from having fatter tyres, right? I mean, what's different?
Well, above all, they're stronger. I mean, the first thing that you'll do if you take an ordinary bike up a hill is break the frame. Then you'll
the
break the wheels, and then your saddle will break off.
So,
So the whole thing is stronger
successful,
all
yeah,
round,
right.
yes.
Well, the thing I can't understand about it is that, for instance, you can't cycle it up a mountain. It's not a mountain bike. It's really only a trail bike, isn't it?
No, it's a mountain
You
bike.
can, you cannot,
it's
you
an
cannot
all-terrain
cycle that.
bike.
But
Yes,
you
you
can't
can.
cycle it up. I bet you. Well, you can't cycle
No,
that
you
up
can't,
the
you can't
Aonach,
cycle.
can you?
No.
I challenge you then to take those bikes and cycle them up, and I mean cycle, not carry, up that
that.
mountain.
Your challenge is accepted.
Yeah.
Do you want to try? We'll go up there and try the grass.
I don't care what they call them. To me, they're just dressed up push bikes. If I want mountain transport, I want something sleek and fast. Something that gets me where I'm going and yet says something about the kind of gal I am and the kind of lifestyle I lead, which is why I'm going for this little baby. Monocoque chassis, fixed gear, low profile tyres, and has the advantage over a mountain bike of being able to carry a rucksack here. This little baby can go anywhere a mountain bike can, and you don't look half as stupid pushing this up a hill. Whoa, can this thing move? Whoa!
The way I see it is this.
Well, it's by Dundonnell at Little Loch Broom, just south of Ullapool, that we're about to start climbing arguably one of Scotland's finest mountains.
In Teallach, it just means the hearth. And that's the only pronunciation I've ever heard for the ordinary word. In Teallach.
We're starting from sea level, which means this is going to be an incredibly hard, relentless slog, because we have to climb up 3,473 feet, or 1,059 metres for all you metric brats. However, it will be worth all those screaming, tearing muscles when we get there and you view the sharp, pinnacled rocky crest that tops the top of Teallach. All right, it's not that steep, but it is relentless, and the other annoying thing is that that craggy, exciting mountain is hiding behind that hill. I only know it's there because I've been here before, so don't get despondent at this stage. Well, absolutely no need for despondency, because you walk alongside a very pretty little burn and a good place to fill the water bottle, since you won't find any water up on the ridge. Well, it's been a long, hard, possibly dispiriting trudge up here to the Teallach. Hellishly eroded that path down in the lower reaches. It's like walking through somebody's school dinners. And still no hint of the drama and majesty to come that is Teallach. In fact, we could be in the borders here or in somebody's field, apart from the fact I'm backed by the magnificent Ascent Hills in the Atlantic Ocean. However, that is the slog over. It's time for the scary bits. Well, not quite yet, all that's still to come, but you do leave the grass and the bog and get your boots onto some good solid rock. Well, as you can see, someone's obviously been given an Arts Council grant to erect these astonishing cairns. I'll call this one Woman Reclining, right. And this is a very interesting little col beneath the summit of the first Munro. It's fascinating, it's a rock formation that looks almost like a cobbled street. Well, it's actually Torridonian sandstone, but the grey scree you'll find at the top is Cumbrian quartzite. Now this is the route we're taking so far. The two Munros are marked in white, and the blue shows a top that we'll be taking in as well. Well, we've made it at last to the top of the first Munro, the highest of the two, Beinn Glass Tool at 3,484 feet. It's taken us 2.5 hours to get here. We're rather proud of that. You might scorn it. And one of the reasons I adore Teallach with a passion, apart from its great beauty as a mountain, are these superb views across the ocean you get. As you can see behind me, the Summer Isle, Stockle to Buoy. And also as far as Grenard Island, now cleared entirely of its anthrax, they say, although I don't see too many caravan or camping parks there. Now getting a view to Sgurr, the second Munro, not pronounced Sgurr incidentally, but there, stretching in all its glory, is Teallach's pinnacles. It really is a centrefold of a mountain, a page 3 of a Munro. Well, this is it. The second Munro, Sgurr. And if you're just a Munro bagger with no sense of adventure at all, then this is as far as you go. You just tick off the second peak, retrace your steps back down to the car park. And I have to confess that 2 years ago when I first did Teallach, that's exactly what I did. But not today, because the best is yet to come. We're going the whole way along the ridge. And Ross, our researcher, the man with the beard, tells us that so far it's been an easy hill walking experience. From now on, it's hands-on. And the first really dramatic pinnacle is called Lord Berkeley's Seat. It's not so frightening from the west side, but it's only by climbing to the top and possibly lying on your stomach to peer over the edge that you get any idea of the terrifying cliff you're clinging to. Well, technically there's another 2 tops to go before you complete this ridge walk, and purists, of course, will want to do those. However, we're running out of time and we're running out of steam. We want to go home for our dinner. So we've chosen this rather sharp gully to go down. But I should say, if you're going to do that, you must take equal care in a gully like this as you do on top of a ridge like that. I know it's exposed dramatic rock, but this can be equally as dangerous. We've been smarty pants and we've left the car about 2 miles away from where we started in the car park, so we don't have a long walk home if we take this circuitous route. But by doing this, what we do is see Teallach from the corrie and the loch, which should not be missed if you have the opportunity. It is a bit steep actually. It's much easier to continue the ridge and then descend, but this was Ross's shortcut to get us down off the mountain before dark. It's a long, hard day, but even the route home is stunning. So if you're looking for a mountain that combines a challenge with a walk that will make you literally crawl into bed that night, then Teallach is a stunning choice.
Aonach, Eagach. In Gaelic, we usually put the definite article before it, which is A-N-T hyphen, and say Aonach, Eagach. It means the gapped or notched mountain.
Well, Glencoe is arguably Scotland's most scenic glen, and it's here we're doing a ridge walk between 2 Munros. It's mainland Britain's narrowest ridge, and it's called the Aonach Eagach. Ah! It is an extremely dangerous ridge, and that's why you shouldn't be attempting it too early on in your Munro career. A slip up there is no laughing matter, and a lot of people have been killed. The National Trust for Scotland own the whole of Glencoe, and of course the Aonach Eagach. Ah! And they very sensibly have put up this sign warning you that once you're up there on the ridge, there's no way off until the very end. A bit like this show, really. Glencoe is one of the most popular and busy areas in Scotland for climbers and walkers, and because of its difficulties, the Aonach Eagach makes a good transition for most Munro baggers between simple walking and tricky exposed scrambling. Well, we're more than halfway up Ambodach, the first top. It's not the Munro, but it's where we first see the full view of the ridge. It's about 2,000 feet, and we've gained height very quickly. It's only taken us about an hour from the car park. You get a fantastic view from up here. You can see all the way down Glencoe and right across to the west. This is our route. The tops will be doing are marked in blue and the Munros are marked in white. Like most linear ridge walks, you'll finish some miles down the road from where you started, so arrange a lift back or time it with public transport. Well, just below the cairn of Ambodach is where all the views that make you go start, including this one, a jutting piece of rock called the Chancellor. I'm not going in that, so don't even think about it. Now, if the ridge ahead frightens you, don't forget you can do both Munros as single peaks. In fact, you can come up as far as Ambodach, a simple top, and still have a fantastic day out that involves a good bit of leg muscle. All the views here you will ever need. Behind me the Mamores, and beyond that Beinn Nevis. Pointy wee one is Beinn, and Sgurr is there. Sgurr was my 50th Munro, incidentally. Probably find that not at all interesting. Over here is Rannoch Moor, the Blackwater Reservoir. Beyond that, Schiehallion. Pointy little fellow, isn't he? He gets everywhere. You can see Schiehallion from practically everywhere. Over here is Buccleuch of Moor. Buccleuch of Moor. Thank you. The Bidian Range. And all the way across to the west here at Ballachulish is Beinn Mhaim. And you can actually see the Glenfinnan Hills beyond that. But what we can really see is the ridge we are about to do. And what a ridge it is, nothing short of magnificent. First piece of really nasty scrambling to get to the Munro over there. And you might find it surprising that people who do Munros like myself sometimes suffer from vertigo, which I do, and which I'm suffering from a little bit now. I'm not terribly sure how I'm going to feel about this piece, but I do have a healthy bit of terror in my stomach. I'm going down there and I might be some time. Whoa, what a chicken! But no wonder that Eagach has such a fearsome reputation. It may look benign enough from the safety of the car park in Glencoe, but listen well to those who tell you that this is no place for the inexperienced. Halfway along the ridge is not a time to decide you'd rather be having tea and scones in the village. But if your mountaineering skills are up to it, then you won't be disappointed. Not only will the challenges ahead thrill you in any weather, but on a clear day, the area exposure on all parts of this ridge is the best you can get short of going to Skye. This is called Dearg. It means red hill. It's 3,118 feet. Of course, some people think it shouldn't be called the Red Hill. They think it should be called Hill of the Brown Underpants. And when you see the ridge behind me we still have to go, I think you'll know why, dear viewer. We've been very lucky today though, A, because the weather's been great, there's not much wind and there's sun, and B, because we've only met one other party of people. Apparently if you do the Eagach at the weekend, you can sometimes queue to get over these pinnacles because the way is so narrow. Anyway, I am breathing very hard, the knot of fear in my stomach is tightening, and I'm going to attempt them. This is the narrowest part of the ridge, and the route goes over and round these two notorious pinnacles. Now I'm cheating slightly because researcher Ross is just ahead of me, making sure I don't stray off the safest route, as well as shouting rude things about how I climb like a donkey. Don't know what he means. But if you can stand the abuse, it's a good policy to have a companion with you who's done the ridge before. It makes you feel a lot more confident. Well, it depends how insolent they're being, of course. What does a gormless grachel mean? Terror City. Completely.
Well, tell us what it was like.
I need my researcher, I need the man with the beard. Well, here we are at the second Munro at the end of this ridge walk. It's Sgurr nam Finny or Sgurr nam Finn or depending how you pronounce it. I'm not terribly sure what the accurate pronunciation is. It's 3,168 feet, and this has been a magnificent ridge. I can really recommend it. Fear and terror aside, just make sure you've got somebody with a beard alongside you to keep you right. We started out a bit late today because the weather was very poor this morning, but we're being rewarded now with a magnificent sunset across Loch Awe, and we can see the Balhulish Bridge and the mountains beyond. It's wonderful. Now, it might depress wilderness lovers that sheer force of numbers on the hills is causing huge eroded paths to appear on all the most popular peaks and ridges. The problem's becoming so bad that professional path makers have to be called in to repair damage and rebuild existing routes. Now, that's fine for those who hate to stray off the path, but not so great for those who like their hills untouched by human pickaxe. So what are you doing here then?
What we're doing, we're changing the route of the path so it's basically easier and safer to walk in certain sections, because as you can see further down the erosion that there is, so we're repairing that.
So what are you going to do? Put rocks on top of
We're
that?
going to build a rock face to stop the bank from moving in future, and then resurface the path so it's easier to walk.
I see. Who pays for it?
Well, this is National Trust for Scotland's land, and they're paying for it at the minute.
I see.
But it depends on the site that we work on.
A horrible spectre of the future is that some landowners would like to find a way to make walkers pay for the upkeep of their paths. There's no need to worry yet, but if you use the hills a lot, it's worth keeping an eye on the situation. Well, the majority of Munros don't have tidy, well-trodden paths to the top. You're going to have to find your own way up, and that means being able to read a map well and efficiently. For instance, if you come across an obstacle like a river in spate, check on the Ordnance Survey map that there is a bridge before you attempt to cross. Of course, the good old Ordnance Survey, often it will have a bridge marked, and I'm afraid it may well turn out to be a bridge like this. A bridge too shugly. Ah! Don't even think of trying this at home, children. Now, you're going to come across quite a lot of these bridges, designed specifically to deal with rivers and spades, so it's worth taking the time to learn how to cross them properly. Go wrong! Mommy!
Well, see, is this.
If you say Beinn Cruachan, it's not bad, it's all right. But the Gaelic is Cruachan Bheinn.
This is a fascinating mountain. Oh, a fascinating mountain. Hollowed out to provide hydroelectric power, it houses the turbines that create the electricity, and it has the kind of subterranean fantasy atmosphere that James Bond would be proud to abseil down into clutching a semi-automatic weapon. It is, of course, Beinn Cruachan at the head of Loch Awe, and the starting point for this mountain is in the rather gloomy pass of Brander on a busy main road. You can always walk up the road that gives power workers vehicular access to the dam, but it's not as scenic as this route. Coming up direct from the visitors' centre takes you through a Tolkien-esque little path through a forest of oak, birch and hazel, and you also get this fantastic view of Loch Awe behind me. However, there's some confusion about where to start this from, because you have to cross the railway line at some point. We, like good citizens, tried to go under a railway bridge and not trespass on the rails. However, a man in a boiler suit came out of a porta cabin and gave us a bit of a row, so we had to cross the line. This beautiful little path continues up as far as the dam. It's at 1,300 feet you emerge from the woods to your first sight of the magnificent dam. It was built in 1965, and right beneath my feet, below this ground, is a subterranean cavern 300 foot long that could house a 7-storey building. The power of it all is awesome. What's that? I'm kidding. Terrifying up close. I wish I hadn't seen Superman. But the echo is astonishing. Listen to this. Hello there.
Hello there.
Amazing. There's no locked gates in the dam, and Scottish Power don't seem to mind walkers crossing it to get to the mountain. If you're doing Beinn Cruachan as a single peak, as we are today, we're a bit lazy, then what you have to do is keep to the west side of the reservoir when you get up to the dam. Carry along this Land Rover track for about 3/4 of a mile till you come to a cairn showing you the path up Dearg to the top. However, there's a fantastic ridge walk that you can do and a great big horseshoe that takes in another Munro. But by doing that, you have to keep to the east side of the reservoir, so don't cross the dam. That's the easy stuff over. It's now time for the climb to attain the peak. The problem with ascending Beinn Cruachan this way is that the route is very enclosed, meaning you'll have to wait until the top to enjoy any real panoramas. But then that might be what you're after, getting your head down in the hard part of the climb, only to be rewarded with all the views at the summit. When you've sweated your way up this far, it's rather demoralising to discover someone's been up long before you carrying a load of wire and wooden posts. Who puts up these astonishing fences? Don't be put off Beinn Cruachan just because it has a visitors centre attached to it. I think even big hairy Munros would enjoy this walk. It's really great. I'm having a good time today anyway, so I don't care what they think. And it's surprising that for such a popular mountain, the path isn't as badly eroded as I imagined. It's not a 10-foot deep trench by any means. And this nice rocky path here means that we're nearly at the top. Ta-da! 3 hours and we're at the top of Beinn Cruachan. 3,689 feet. The translation of Beinn Cruachan is either Stacky Hill or Haunch of Peaks. Take your choice there. This is a trig point, incidentally, put here by the Ordnance Survey to have their lunch on when they come up hills like this. Now you can see the ridges to the east and the west that you can either descend by, or if you're feeling fit, absorb in one huge big long walk in a single day. But it's by no means dull doing Beinn Cruachan on its own, because you get fantastic views all the way to the coast and up Glenetive all the way to Glencoe. A good low-level walk, incidentally, takes in the whole loch starting from Teallach. Fantastic views, well worth the effort.
I have never heard a separate name for the inaccessible pinnacle itself. It's regarded as part of the Sgurr. Now, the native pronunciation is Sgurr, the being the. There is a glide A or sound put between Sgurr and Dearg. That's very common in Gaelic. Sgurr, the Red Peak.
Well, for those serious about completing the Munros, the mecca for climbers is Skye. That is, of course, the romantic isle off the northwest coast of Scotland and not the satellite television channel favoured by those with Rottweilers. There's 12 fantastic Munros here in the Coolan Hills, and they're quite unlike anything you'll find in mainland Scotland, almost alpine in appearance. And today we're going to climb one of the most famous peaks in Skye. It's the only Munro, incidentally, for which you require the services of a companion with rock climbing experience, which we boast in our man with the beard Ross, and a good sturdy rope. The dauntingly titled Inaccessible Pinnacle. I don't want to go up it. Don't make me. Of course, the downside of Skye being so popular is that thousands of eager boots have eroded a path that Concorde could land on. But it does show enormous fortitude from climbers and walkers that they still frequent the Coolan, since Skye is more often than not obscured under appalling weather. There's a big hard pull to get up onto the ridge, but then isn't there always? However, the lack of vegetation to bog you down and trip you up makes the going a little easier on the legs, and the views across Corrie Lagan will certainly keep you going. It's a straightforward route, it's just a slog up onto the ridge, but there is some scrambling, so take care. The Skye slope you see here on the other side of the corrie is amazingly the only easy way up Sgurr Alistair. Oh yes, very easy, I don't think. It's called the Great Stone Chute, and it used to be a firm favourite with scree runners, but alas no longer, because years of use have knocked all the smaller stones down to the bottom. Up here on the ridge is where your nerve may start to desert you. The Cuillin can sometimes look a little dark and satanic, and for those used to the heather-clad peaks of the mainland, the jutting teeth of rock that protrude from every angle of the ridge might just prove too much. But keep your head, it's worth it. Well, if you want to complete the Munro that is Sgurr Dearg, then I'm afraid this is what you're going to have to climb, the inaccessible pinnacle, the in-pin. I am not a rock climber, so I have to get Ross, who's a rock climber, to help me up here. You can't even think of doing this peak unless you have somebody like Ross with you. How do we do it? How do we physically do it?
Well, basically we just climb up there, and I go up first. When the rope comes tight, I'll shout down, and you just come up.
And what, I clip the rope onto me?
I'll tie you onto the rope from here, and you'll see the rope going up, and when it goes tight and I shout, you just simply climb up after me.
Simply
Dead
climb
easy.
up. It's easy to you, but I'm terrified of heights. I've never rock climbed before. This has been my first experience of it.
Just remember, you can't go anywhere even if you do fall.
And what'll happen? I'll just sort of
You'll just
dangle.
Go for a dangle. You've gone all quiet.
What's that?
You've gone all quiet.
I've gone very quiet. It's because I'm not feeling too great about this.
You okay?
Yes, I'm okay. Just no more. Just keep going or I'm gonna bottle out. Just go. It's all very well that I'll be safely on a rope if I fall, but if Ross falls on his way up now, there's nothing to stop him becoming an omelette in a cagoule. However, in rock climbing terms, this is graded as difficult, which actually means it's considered to be very easy. What strange people rock climbers are. So while this is agony for me, I don't hear our man in the beard whimpering. Now you might wonder, as I did, why I'm being dragged up the hard, steep side when the more obvious and easier route up is on the long fin you can see here. Well, the reason is that being roped up, which you must be even for the scramble up the long side, means that a slip will see you swinging like a pendulum instead of falling just a few feet and dangling. The other horror of the easier side is the incredible exposure that those with no head for heights may well find terrifying. What's that? Yes, I'm trying to move left. I can't. I'm trying to find these footholds you're telling me about. God, I'm panicking already.
Alright, just keep moving.
Okay, Mum.
Just keep moving to that way.
The biggest fear for a non-rock climber like myself is the fear of freezing and getting stuck. This is something that experienced people like Ross can never understand. To him, this is a doddle. What? But even though I know it's technically impossible for me to plummet into the glen, held secure as I am by Ross's rope, the irrational fear of falling is constant and uncomfortable. Loosen the rope a bit.
Retract it. This is the slabby bit you're worrying so much about.
You made it.
Have a seat, get up.
Oh, I made it! On busy days you can queue to do the in-pin, and the thought of having to go through all this in front of an impatient crowd fills me with an even bigger dread. Well, let's be thankful for small mercies. It was just the film crew.
I'm looking up at you. How do you do? I'm looking up at you.
I'm down! Whoa!
Where see is this? Life's a precipice. You thought I'd sink to the bottom of the pile, but I prefer to rise. Acclimatized, I'm the one to make your dreams be true. The way you do it is this. You know what half the trouble is, it's you.
Yo, wake up, open your eyes. You have to aim big, aim wide, aim high, so come on.
I'm looking up at you.
Yes, yes, we're back again, snug in our fleecy tops, ready to wander around in terrain like this all over Scotland, bringing you the thrills and spills of climbing the Munros, the mountains over 3,000 feet, from the most northerly to the most southerly, to mountains like that aren't even Munros. Ha! We stop at nothing. Indeed, for a start we'll be on Skye, quaking on the top of Sgurr and Gillean, and we'll be trekking up Slioch by lovely Loch Awe. And the non-Munro we promised you is magnificent Suilven in Assent. There's a long day trip along the Devil's Ridge to the summit of Sgurr, and we travel back to Torridon to cross the pinnacles and stately Beinn Alligin, and the great Munro Show expedition to Larvin in Knoydart. But first... this fabulous peak can only mean one thing, Munro baggers. We're back on Skye to do the jiggiest and jaggiest of the Cuillins, Sgurr and Gillean. The start point is from the Slioch Hotel, which is extremely convenient, and there's a large tourist route, Ross assures me, all the way to the top. He'd better be right.
We pronounce it in Skye, Sgurr and Gillean. Sgurr has a long U normally, but when you put in the glide vowel between the two consonants after it, it becomes short, Sgurr and Gillean.
If you can't afford to stay at the Slioch Hotel, you can camp here, and there's all-day food and drink facilities for walkers and climbers waiting in vain for the rain to stop. The path literally leaves the front door of the hotel and follows a beautiful burn for the first and easiest part of the route. I'll wager many sticky hikers have plunged their sweaty bodies into one of these clear blue pools at the end of a hot day. I wonder if it affects the hotel's water supply. Well, this is the so-called tourist route that leads you up from Slioch, and it's very pleasant today, but beware, because when it's wet and boggy it can be a hell, because this is the domain of the midgie, and even worse than that, the pit bull terrier of the insect world, the clegg. You can tell a clegg is going to be horrible by its name. Clegg, it's bound to bite you. In fact, one of the very first tourists to come to Skye and write about it, Dr. Samuel Johnson, a man we'd never get tired of slapping, didn't much like this terrain either. In fact, he said of it, "A walk upon ploughed fields in England is a dance upon carpets compared to the toilsome drudgery of Skye. If you don't like it, stay in England, mate." And it's here the path splits. To continue up the path without crossing the bridge would take you up into dramatic Corribastar. Our route towards the ridge, despite Dr. Johnson's grouchy misgivings, is an almost flat walk in, but with great views back towards Loch Slioch. The route leads south across the wide expanse of moor, passing the eastern flanks of the mountain before making an ascent onto the southeast ridge. Obviously, with over 3,000 feet to ascend, it's not all flat, but I'll bet you worked that one out at home for yourself. And as soon as the path starts to climb, the terrain changes dramatically too. Well, when you leave the flat path across the moor there and get up here, there's absolutely no mistaking where you are, unless you mistake it for the planet Sgwelb in an early edition of Doctor Who. Yes, this says Cuillin all over it. Savage, rocky landscape, quite unlike anything else in the rest of the British Isles. The really bad thing about it, though, that I find a little bit dangerous is the looseness of the rock. You've got to be very careful. It comes away in your hand all the time. It needs a bit of a hoover. And this is a ridge we're about to attain, which you can't actually see from Slioch. Very exciting. Incidentally, if you knock a rock over, you're supposed to shout below, just in case it hits someone in the bones. Oh, below. Well, what a delight to skip up here and finally attain the ridge here, the southeast ridge that leads up to the summit. It's been very quick and easy so far, but then we are, as Ross assures us, on the tourist route. Haven't seen too many kiss me quick hats yet so far, but here you get a fantastic view of the whole Skye ridge across the Loch Awe. The ridge starts off simply enough, apart from the difficulty of finding a route around and over the large boulders, but gradually things start to get a little trickier. Supposed to be an easy scramble. Can you imagine how awful this would be if it was wet and slimy? I'm frightened. I'll tell you the worst thing. The worst thing is you break your fingernails. Well, this is it, the tiny little summit of Sgurr Gillean, a quite magnificent mountain at 3,167 feet. The translation of that, incidentally, means Hill of the Young Men. Fat chance of this film crew. Be quiet. But the thing about it is, even though we've come up the tourist route in inverted commas, it's still very exposed and there is some tricky scrambling there, so you should take enormous care. I wouldn't recommend it if you don't have a head for heights. But look at the superb views, quite unmatched by anything I've been on recently. Across there's at Inpin, you remember we did that last series. See, right along the Coolan Ridge, down to Slioch where we started. The red Coolans behind me in Blavin. Spectacular! Now, before you reach those blustery high tops, often you have to walk through terrain like wet, boggy moorland or dark, damp forests. And in there, you'll find something so evil, so malevolent, so hideous that it can make even the hardest mountaineer quake in his boots.
Hate them. Absolutely hate them.
They're sore.
Midges.
And there's thousands of them all over Scotland.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like this and this.
It's one of the few things that can have just grown men to tears.
The midge's name in Latin is Culicoides unpunctatus, and it's found from the West Highlands of Scotland right across into Siberia. But we have fairly strong evidence now that the Scottish race is probably unique. It's certainly far more vicious than its Scandinavian counterpart.
In the summer, basically, you can't go out at night and sit out unless it's windy or you've got a towel around your head.
Well, it's a very serious problem. It has its biggest impact on tourism, of course. But the indigenous industries around here, like forestry and fishing, they are also very severely affected for 3 months of the year. But I have to say that if it were not for the midges, the Highlands of Scotland would not be what they're like today. For a start, I'm quite sure if you look across the loch there, you'd see houses, you'd see little patios and people having breakfast out in the summer and things like that. Well, this is not possible in Scotland. At this time of the year, the midges make sure that we stay inside or keep our heads down.
They say smoke keeps the midges away, don't they?
I think speed's the essence, that's the thing, get away from them.
The biting is done by the female midge. The male midge is something you would never even bother about. But the female, in order to lay eggs, has to have a blood meal. And if she doesn't get a blood meal, then she won't lay any eggs. People used to have all sorts of remedies, concoctions from oils and various plants and things like that. But the bulk of them, I'm afraid, are not really very effective.
But do not despair, because there are a number of commercial preparations in the market that claim to be able to alleviate the pain and suffering caused by midgie attack. And Ross, our researcher, is a man who stinks quietly under canvas on a regular basis in the hills. So who better to be able to talk us through the effectiveness of these products? Ross? Now, for instance, the repellent spray, Ross, is a very popular product indeed. How would you rate that when you're in your tent?
Rubbish.
Rubbish.
Chanel number 19 apparently works.
Eat lots of garlic.
Ross, you have little faith. Are you standing there telling me nothing repels midges?
Nothing at all.
Well, perhaps I might change your mind, young man, because I have here something that's been handed down to the Greys through centuries, generations. This is an old recipe. I'm not at liberty, obviously, to tell you what's exactly in here, but I can reveal that it's a mixture of herbs, sheep's droppings and pig's bladder. Never fails.
Won't work.
I think you'll find it will. Off with your shirt.
Eh?
Get your shirt off. We obviously have to, prove this scientifically. Come on, hurry up. I've got all day. So if you wouldn't mind just turning this way, and we'll just see exactly how well this works. And I think you'll find that'll do the trick. See you later. I mean, don't worry, it's worked for centuries. You'll be fine. Oh, I know why it's not working. I forgot to marinate the stag's eyeballs. Now, connoisseurs followers of the classic calendar shot will know that there's a few megastars, these views that appear every single year no matter what the calendar. There's the Falls of Dochart at Gillean, there's the hills of Glencoe as seen from the meeting of the three waters, and there is this, yes, mighty Slioch as glimpsed from across the lovely waters of Loch Awe. How often have you sat and gazed at that picture in the calendar in your office or factory and thought, firstly, damn, I've missed Canadian Thanksgiving Day, and secondly, oh, I wish the Munro Show would show us how to ascend that craggy fortress of rock. Hey, that's what we're here for.
The Gaelic is in Slioch or in Slioch, and Slioch is a Gaelic for a spear, but it would appear to have something to do with the word spear, although it certainly doesn't look like a spear.
Well, this is certainly the most popular route up Slioch. Starts in the sleepy little hamlet of Loch Awe at the head of Loch Awe. And believe me, this is the centre of the Midgey universe. It's no joke. They're so bad here that in the 17th century, if you were a criminal, your punishment was to be stripped naked and tied to a tree at dusk and left to the fate of the Midgeys. So there's an interesting one for corporal punishment fans. Instead of chanting, bring back the birch, you now start chanting, bring back the small biting insect. Doesn't have quite the same ring though, does it? Now it's a long walk in before we start to actually ascend Slioch, but it's a pretty one alongside the river Loch Awe. Then we get to Glenbeannaisdale and starts to do some work. Loch Awe and its surroundings are one of the greatest attractions of climbing Slioch. It's surely one of the most beautiful lochs in Scotland, and there's a wonderful low-level walk along its north shore to Poolew, where the famous gardens are. It's a sublime walk taking you through almost every variety of Highland scenery you could imagine. The islands in the loch are particularly outstanding, and since they've been protected from the insatiable jaws of the red deer, they boast original Scots pines. On the heavily grazed main shores of the loch, however, trees have to really struggle to survive. This is the mouth of Glenbeannaisdale, where we have to start a slow incline up into the corrie that'll take us onto the ridge of Slioch. Beautiful peaty river to follow most of the way up. There are lots of interesting routes up Slioch, but the most popular is up Glenbeannaisdale and into the bowl-shaped corrie. This shows the route up the southeast ridge. Glenbeannaisdale is an impressive site, boasting dramatic cliffs on its eastern side and cut deeply by a river with an unpronounceable name. I'm not even going to try. Well, I'm glad to report that so far it's been quite an easy walk. We've come 4 miles, and because the path inclines so gently, we've only climbed a rather dispiriting 400 feet. So I suspect all the climbing is about to start. But you've got to strike off this path now, because if you continue along it, it takes you into the heart of the Fisherfield Forest, a wilderness. I wouldn't recommend you stumble around it unless you know exactly where you're going. But a feature of this part of the climb is that because of the slopes hemming you in, you're not going to get any of those big panoramic views until you reach the summit. And that's the way it should be. It's character building. You just wait for those views. The great thing about putting in the legwork to haul yourself up into the crater-like corrie of Slioch is the surprise and joy you experience when your head appears over the rise and the mountain reveals its secrets to you at last. Now here's a really interesting wildlife tidbit, because there's supposed to be a herd of wild goats roaming about in this part of Slioch. No one's quite sure how they got here, although one theory is that they're descendants of the domestic livestock belonging to the people who were kicked off this land during the hideous Highland clearances. I was sure I saw one down there, a big hairy thing, but it was just Ross.
Ross Murray? I thought it looked like Patrick Swayze.
Although it doesn't compare with its Torridon neighbours with their knife-edge ridges and terrifying precipices, Slioch has a charm and wistful beauty all of its own. Its complexity is also intriguing. From the southern shores of Loch Awe, you would never guess at the odd arrangement of its topography. But as soon as you find yourself in amongst it all, enjoying it from every angle, it's easy to see why Slioch is one of the most popular mountains in this part of Scotland. Well, there's no mistaking when you've got up over the ridge. What a wind! You could paraglide down with the wrapper from your sandwiches. Well, I know we said that we weren't going to get a panoramic view until we got to the top, but I fibbed. That would have been the case if we'd stuck to the bowl. But we couldn't wait, so we climbed up onto the ridge and, who cares? Devil may care, that's the Munro show. This bit we've got here, the summit of Slioch, which means the spear incidentally, 3,192 feet. An absolute sublime spot. Its isolated position gives it one of the best viewpoints in the Western Highlands. Drink in those views, go on, tuck in. Magnificent mountain Slioch is, but perhaps if you're the sort of person who likes to climb the moment you've laced up your boots, then this isn't for you because of that enormously long walk in. And a long walk in means something. What is it again?
A long walk out.
Oh yes, a long walk out. So you're a Munro bagger, are you? And that means, of course, that you won't consider climbing anything under 3,000 feet, because, as everybody knows, they present the greatest challenge in mountaineering. Well, phooey to that. This is Assynt, possibly one of the most beautiful areas in the world. When I used to come here as a snivelling brat on camping holidays, the thing that captured my imagination was the incredible mountains that dominate this area, none more so than Suilven. But of course, this is the Munro show, and Suilven is not a Munro, so we won't be climbing that, will we? Try and stop us.
It will be pronounced in Gaelic, Suilven. I am told that it is Sul is from a Norse word meaning a pillar.
Our start point is from the car park at Glencanisp Lodge, a couple of miles from Loch Inver. A short and pleasant walk takes you around the back of the lodge and onto a stalker's path. The house is owned by the Vesties, one of Britain's richest families, and as a holiday house, it's certainly got one of the biggest back gardens in the world. The route goes right past their house, and no matter what your views are on the outdated feudal system in Scotland, make sure you shut their gates. There's no shortcuts to get to Suilven at all. It's an enormously long hike which you just have to thole to get to the bottom of it. But it is through outstandingly beautiful countryside and full of wildlife. We saw an otter in this loch behind me. Of course, we weren't fast enough to unpack the camera from its rucksack, and in the time it took us to do it, it had raised a family, eaten a couple of trout and so on, so you just have to take our word for it. But it's in there, honest. Geologically, it's Lewisian gneiss that makes Suilven so hard to get at. Try walking towards it in a straight line and you'll soon be weeping with fatigue and frustration, waist deep in either water or bogland. The two most popular routes are our one from Glencanisp, which weaves through the Lochans to get you onto the ridge, and a less well-trodden path from Inverkirkaig further south. I've done both, and I can tell you this route from the northwest is quicker. Well, it may be a 4-mile walk to here, but it's 4 very easy miles along this terribly well-constructed stalker's path that incidentally brings you out to Elfin should you continue along it, and that's a stupendous low-level walk for those who can't be bothered climbing, scuttling around as you would be beneath this bizarre mountain architecture in Ascent. However, this is what Cairn is saying to me: Muriel, cut out all this easy walking nonsense and get yourself up there, wade through some thigh-deep heather, fall over in some mud. Okay then. Well, this swimming peat bog is what masquerades as the path up to Suilven from the Stalker's Path. What incredibly bad erosion. It's just as well Suilven isn't in Munro, otherwise it would be 500 times worse. Terrible. The path's so boggy and past caring. You think you're never going to get here, but here at last we are at the base of Suilven, and all we need to do now is a long, hard, sharp pull up onto the ridge, and that's it. We're nearly at the summit. Thank heavens! Well, if you're dispirited at this stage after such a long trek and faced with nothing more than a featureless grassy slope that seems to go on forever, comfort yourself with the thought that when you reach the ridge, you'll enjoy views that will make every weary mile you've walked and stumbled seem as nothing. To say this mountain repays the walker's effort is a bit of an understatement. See what I mean? And after that climb onto the ridge, there's a bit of a surprise lurking on Suilven's narrow back. This immaculately constructed dry stone wall is a mystery even to the locals. We asked everybody we could think of who built the wall, and nobody had a clue. Walls were often built over the backs of hills to stop sheep straying off crags, but since there are crags on both sides of this wall, it doesn't make sense. Well, this is it. The quite magnificent and seemingly unattainable summit of Suilven. This is the summit along at the west end. You can see the east summit there, which is slightly lower. And to get to that, it's quite a terrific scramble, but probably worth doing if you get this far. Munros Schmunros, it doesn't have to be one. This is 2,399 feet, and it matches any of the views you'll get from the larger mountains on the west coast of Scotland. Over here you can see Culmore and Culbeg. The Inverpolly Nature Reserve, which also contains Stack Polly, an intriguing little hill that you can run up and down in about 2 hours if you're fit. Seeing all the way to the Summer Isles, Ochiltebue, and down here to Loch Inver, across this incredible moorland pitted with all these little lochans covered in water lilies during the summer. Quite magnificent. Well, we're starting today's walk from the Paul Du car park in Glen Nevis, where two significant things often happen. Firstly, tourists punch each other's noses for the best parking places, and secondly, the River Nevis tumbles dramatically down into Loch Linney. Look, it does. See, very dramatic indeed. We're heading for the Mamores, which is a range of mountains rather logically sandwiched between Kinloch Leven, home of aluminium, and Glen Nevis, home of aluminium chairs. It contains 11 Munros, and we're going to try and do 3 today, finishing off with Sgurr of Beinn. And we have to go across something called the Devil's Ridge. I'm so sorry. Well, this is one way to start, by climbing the stile, but if you want to save a river crossing, which we certainly wish we had, you can begin a few hundred yards down the road. It's a long day and needs an early start.
The first is pronounced Sgurr. Mhaim can mean anything like really a lump on the body to a rounded hill. Sgurr, the peak of the yew tree, Ur, a yew tree, and it would appear to be a very common kind of tree in the old Highlands. Stop means it's much the same word as the English stab, something that stabs. Stop barn, the fair or white stop.
Glen Nevis has always been under threat from those who'd like to turn Scotland into a theme park, but happily so far no amount of hot dog stands, gift shops, cafes and visitors centres have undermined its celebrated beauty. It's a very upper-class cairn, this one made of quartzite. Well, we've made it up onto this ridge at last, and there are so many ways to get at the Mamores that the permutations of walks are absolutely endless. We've chosen this one, which is walking along the north ridge of Stobban, simply because it gives us this fantastic airy ridge walk all the way around this horseshoe, taking in 2 extra Munros apart from Sgurr, and the fact that you can see exactly where you're going all the way along the walk. And that can either be very inspiring, the whole day's walk stretching out before you, or very daunting, showing you how far you're still to go. Daunting, I think. Another popular route is to come up from Kinloch, taking a break from walking the West Highland Way. But this is the circular route we're doing. A hard pull up onto the ridge takes us to the first Munro Stobban, then we ridge walk towards the next stop, Sgurr. Finally we brave the section called the Devil's Ridge to take us to Sgurr, then back down to the start point. Well, a bit of scrambling, a bit of slogging, and this is where you get to. The top of Stobban, 3,277 feet. Magnificent views all around, our way down to Loch Awe. Behind, you can see the ridge the other side of the corrie, that Devil's Ridge, still awaits us. And you can see down to Loch Leven and Kinloch Leven. It's possible to do all 11 Munros in one day if you're both super fit and extremely stupid. After all, what's the point of racing around the tops as fast as you can go if you don't ever stop, take time to sit at the cairn with a cheese sandwich and enjoy views like this? Strangely, the Munro Tables are always being revised as grim-faced men argue about the status of mountains. The second top, Sgurr at 3,283 feet, was only allowed to become a real Munro in 1980. It used to be a humble top, but now it gets ticked off by hundreds of baggers. Silly, isn't it? Might be a big walk, but a whole new set of treats on this side of the corrie. Completely different view and a chance to look back at Stobban. But this is the real treat. Ha ha ha, the Devil's Ridge. Although I have to say, in summer it doesn't look that demonic, even though the guidebooks say that some would welcome the security of a rope. Can't see why. However, in winter it's a completely different matter. Crampons, ice axe, the lot. Even in summer though, I have to say, get your hands out of your pockets, bit of concentration, and you should enjoy it thoroughly. so far so good. No mishaps as yet on this narrow little ridge. The only thing to watch out for though is the view is so spectacular on every side. You really should watch where you're putting your feet and not gawk around you as you walk. This behind me though is the first stumbling block, shall we say, the bad step. And as you can see, the obvious way is to go up across the top, leaping from boulder to boulder, or this little bypass path. I wonder which one I'll take. The bypass path. Pathetic. But even on this innocent bypass path, care is needed. There's a tricky bit to step round. After the effort you have to expend to get this far, the last thing you need is another climb. But I'm afraid there's another big pull to get to the final summit. But if you want to stop and take a photograph of the ridge to impress your sofa-bound friends, then halfway up this last slope is a place to do it, since this is undoubtedly the best vantage point. It's a slightly sad but inevitable fact that popular ridges like this one end up with huge paths cutting across their crests. But when you hit the notoriously slippy quartzite boulder fields near the summit, you suddenly become rather grateful for the path winding between the rocks. Yes. No. Well, do I look like a woman who has just safely negotiated the Devil's Ridge? Yes, I do, because here we are at the summit of Sgurr, a sublime mountain at 3,606 feet. It's a huge quartzite dome which glitters in the sunshine. In fact, people from down there in the glen often mistake it as being covered in snow, which plainly it is not. But I have to say that the Mamores are possibly my most favourite mountains in Scotland. They're accessible from both Edinburgh and Glasgow, and they present some of the most challenging and interesting mountaineering in the whole country. And look what you can see from up here. I can see all the way from the Glencoe hills. Behind me across there is the Bear pair, that's Beinn and its pointy companion at Ballachulish. Down the glittering waters of Loch Awe to the hills of Morven. Even see Ben Resipol poking up there, not a Munro, but another favourite mountain of mine. Even Fort William can look attractive from a mountain like this. And this is the benign back end of Ben Nevis, just topped with cloud there, but nevertheless you can see the Carmore Jerrigaret snaking away in here. This is superb. Now, how did Sir Hugh Munro know what was going to happen weather-wise before he pulled on his boots and packed his rucksacks and headed for the hills? Well, in those days there was only one way of predicting the weather, and that was to turn to the age-old methods. For instance, the pine cone. The pine cone can tell us if it's going to rain or not. As you can see, it's open, so that means it's going to rain. But strangely enough, the cows are standing up, and I'm sure you were often in the back seat of your parents' car and they told you, the cows are lying down, so that means it's going to rain. Oh, you see, a bit confusing. Luckily, we do not have to rely on these methods because we have spent billions of pounds on computer and satellite-aided technology.
Well, weather radar, which is now on stream, is a very vital piece of information. That gives us an overall view of the weather systems across Scotland at any one time. It tells you now where the rain is. Say it's now coming into the west of Scotland. It can tell you how that rain is moving, how quickly it will cross the country. Even looking back in the last 10 years, for example, our 2-day forecast, we can now stretch that up to 5 days just about as accurately.
Cloud level 6,000 feet, fine and clear.
That's what they said.
Mountains do generate their own weather systems. I think when we provide a forecast for the mountains, we provide an overall view of the general weather conditions. Is the weather going to get better or is it going to get worse? I think in winter, most people do realise how bad it can be in the hills, but in summer it can quite often change quite drastically. At low levels, when it is very warm, the top of the mountains, temperature's not much above freezing. You know, it's like the middle of the winter.
Are you sure that's what it said?
That's exactly what it said.
Now, there's been an absolute plethora of climb lines and weather calls, all these 0898 numbers. And where did they get their information from for a start? Did they get it from you?
To be fair, no, they certainly don't get it from us. I believe some of them do get it from America, from American weather services who sell it to them. But obviously, you know, it's hard to see how that can be just as accurate as the weather in this country.
I think you've driven that way. Let me shoot him out. They're very expensive climb lines. All of them are very expensive. They're 38 pence a minute. Do you think they're good value?
Absolutely. I think for somebody going into the hills, they go somewhere and find they can't get into the hills. You know, you're talking about, you know, 50 pence a pound, you know, half a gallon of petrol. And for that, really, you know, which could save them a fairly long journey, I think, yes, they're vital.
And so what's to stop me setting up an 0898 number and calling it Muriel Line and reading the Scotsman and telling people what I think might happen tomorrow?
Well, I think your customers would soon find out just how good it was. I think if you were giving them value for money, if they realised what you were getting was valuable, they would keep using you.
Good afternoon, and here is the situation for the Western Isles, the Ross and Cromarty, the Central Highlands and Loch Awe. It will be mainly rainy, but with some sunny outbreaks later on. And now for the important weather. In England...
Have you been up a Munro before?
I've done 5 Munros now.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Which 5?
Well, actually, to be perfectly honest, it's actually the same Munro 5 times.
So with so much new technology at our fingertips, it's crazy to set out on a hill walk without checking the weather first. After all, a weather forecast these days is only a phone call away.
Good afternoon, and thank you for calling Weather Wrong. Here is the completely wrong weather for the Central Highlands and Loch Awe. This will be followed by the generally incorrect situation in the rest of the country. But first, to ensure that this 97 pence a minute call lasts a little longer than you had planned, here is some light music.
Just looking, I wasn't touching students. We used to make do with a minibus on hill climbing days. Well, this is the car park, a couple of miles west of the lovely village of Torridon, where you start up Beinn Alligin. One of 3 mountains in Torridon, and if you want to be introduced to the mountains of Torridon, probably the least demanding to start out, and the other 2, Liathach and Beardy, demand a little bit more oomph. It's very busy, but that's because the National Trust own Beinn Alligin, and there's no stalking restrictions, plus it's a very popular area. Look at that, that's lovely, you can see why it's so popular. That's enough, thank you, mountains to climb. Now, this is the start of the route here, which goes through a beautiful, picturesque little forest. However, tourists come up here with their dogs and walk around on it and so on, but we only enjoy it for a few miles and then we actually have to start climbing.
The Gaelic pronunciation would be Beinn Alligin. Now, there's Alligin, meaning a jewel, or something very beautiful, and it could be the genitive of that. There is, however, a difficulty, as pointed out by the great Watson, that there's an Inver Alligin, which would suggest that the name came from a river, as river names are so very old.
It always makes the walk into a hill more enjoyable when the route follows water, and this is a spectacular little river with waterfalls every few hundred yards. There's also a tantalising view of the ridge from down here, just in case you had any second thoughts about nipping back to the car and driving to a hotel for buttered scones. Well, this is where the path divides, and if you should choose to take the path that continues along that side of the river, you'll take a low-level walk round the back of Liathach, a spectacular walk. And incidentally, last year, when we were climbing Liathach, we dropped a very expensive tripod bag off the top into a gully. So if you do this walk and you come across it, please return it to us and it'll be a great reward. Let me think. A night out with Ross Murray. Don't imagine we'll see that bag again. Now we've got to continue up here onto the ridge to get to the summit of Beinn Alligin. And we cross something called the Horns of Alligin. Now that's not the brass section of a soul band, but in fact 2 pinnacles of rock. Why horns and not pinnacles? I have no idea. Well, horns usually come in pairs, but the horns are 3 pinnacles and not 2, which is more bewildering. Well, I'm bewildered, but there's nothing new there. We're traversing Beinn Alligin from east to west, but it's just as enjoyable in the reverse direction. Either way, you can plan a circular route. Well, looks like the stroll is over because we've been broken in very gently so far to get to here, 1,400 feet, without much effort. But this is where the climb begins. And that's the same in any ridge walk, unless there was a big 20-mile long ramp and climbing very gently. You're going to have to haul yourself up onto its back at some point. Just a bit of hard work, nothing too tricky in that enjoyable little scramble that gets you up this high to the highest of the three pinnacles called the Horns of Alligin. And by taking this east-west route, you have to do the pinnacles. You can't just sneak up the Munro and sneak back down again. But I'm up here and I'm still confused. Those are pinnacles, not horns. Why horns? Give me that. Torridon has an atmosphere all of its own that's hard to explain to anyone who hasn't tramped its ferocious hills. It can be brooding and ancient one minute, and the next, when the light changes, it seems like heaven, with the mountains almost possessing their own internal light. Because of their close proximity to the sea, the weather is particularly changeable in the Torridon Mountains, but if you're well equipped, that should be a source of pleasure rather than a problem. Sandstone cliffs and boulder fields are a major feature of Beinn Alligin. Sadly, it was here, below these forbidding slopes, that one of the last wolves in Scotland was hunted down and killed in the mid-18th century. Yes, folks, it's a very long, hard pull up that last bit to get here to the summit of the only Munro in Beinn Alligin, Sgurr. Yes, yet another Munro called Sgurr. How original. But we're going to continue along this ridge and take in another top, which is just as interesting, I think, though it is not a Munro called Tom the Gruach, and that's the way we'll be descending. The views up here are so outstanding, but that's a feature of all the Torridon hills, I think. Across Loch Torridon, you can pick up Beinn Damp, see all the way to the Applecross Hills, and we can just make out Skye today with the sea glittering out there. I'm a happy woman, a happy woman.
The pronunciation of that is Beinn. Lur means a hoof. There's no doubt about that. The B becomes a V sound and is written BH. Beinn.
Now, the internal combustion engine has a lot to answer for, believe me, because now you can just pile into a car, get out, climb a hill, and you're back home before Coronation Street. But happily for wilderness lovers, there are still a few Munros that are so remote and inaccessible that you really are going to have to make an effort to get there. For instance, Larvin, which is the most westerly mainland Munro, is situated in the beautiful region of Knoydart. This is where we've decided to start the great Knoydart expedition from. It's Kinloch Awe, a beautiful place, and what this involves is a 5-mile walk along quite a rough track to Barrisdale Bay in Knoydart, where I'm afraid we have to camp. There is no choice if the bothy's full, but don't worry about me, I'm sure you're not. I'm not a seasoned camper, but Ross, the researcher with the beard who is a seasoned camper, is with me all the way, I assure you, to show me the ropes.
Guidelines.
Guidelines, whatever. The first section of this walk is delightfully straightforward. Simply follow the path from Kinloch Awe along the loch side to Barrisdale Bay. There are numerous ways into Knoydart for a backpacking and Munro bagging spree. You could take the boat from Mallaig to Inverie on the other side of the peninsula, walk in from Glendessery or even Glenfinnan further south. The choices are endless and will have you drooling over the map for hours. Well, the walk along Loch Awe side is so beautiful. It would make a fabulous low-level walk if you didn't want to climb any mountains. But only 10 minutes away from where we started, you get your first view of Larvin. And when you see that fantastic mountain there, it would take great strength of character to resist it. Well, as you can see, the path doesn't always stick exactly to the shoreline. There's a bit of ascending and descending to be done. But it's quite good to get this bit of height. It's a great vantage point to look back at the view. If you can see that small house down there, just make that out. That's actually built or renovated in the site of an old 19th century pub called Skye. And that was where E. Robertson, the Reverend E. Robertson no less, the first Munroist, went in to try and get a bed for the night, but was not impressed. He said the rooms were damp and dirty and there was no beer or whiskey. Imagine no beer or whiskey in a Highland pub. What did they have? Bacardi and Coke and Babycham. This is the most westerly section of the old Caledonian forest in mainland Scotland, and it's genetically unique as it evolved in isolation from the great expanse of trees that once covered the country. Of course, you could always get into Knoydart by boat if you managed to get hold of one, but remember to check the tides. This is us finally arrived at Barrisdale Bay after that beautiful walk. This is where we're going to camp for the night. And I have to say, the last time I stood on this beach was about 11 or 12 years ago. I walked in from Inverie, which is over by Mallaig, and it felt very much like a wilderness. It doesn't feel like a wilderness to me anymore. Maybe that's just my problem. There's lots of boats buzzing around. There's holiday cottages the other side of Loch Awe full of people having a great time, admittedly, and there's certainly lots of walkers. What cannot be spoiled, though, is the majesty of Larvin behind me, which, weather permitting, we will be climbing tomorrow. What kind of tent is that, anyway?
It's a camping tent.
Oh, very funny. You could do with a hoover. Have you tried hoovering it?
Hoovering it?
You can get cordless hoovers.
Cracking day. Oi.
I don't care. Just 5 more minutes, eh? Oh, what's that? Smells too bad. Oh, that's great.
Brilliant.
Well, I have to say that was a pretty painless night's camping, apart, that is, from Ross Murray speaking in his sleep. You can only take so much of a man screaming at Natasha Kinski to leave him alone. However, this is a fantastically convenient way to start Larvin if you're camping here at Barrisdale or using the bothy, because that's the very start of the Stalker's Path up the mountain. And if you're walking in from Kinloch Awe and trying to do it in a day and it's low tide, you can walk straight across the bay if you're prepared to wade a bit and take those boots off. It's going to be a very long, hard, hot, sticky climb today. It's 3,343 feet, sea level start obviously, but we don't mind. We're not going to stay here and paddle because we're strong, tough mountaineers. After crossing the bay and climbing the Stalker's Path, I routed the classic horseshoe traverse of Corrigorchel, a high-level ridge traverse all the way with many ups and downs. it's quite a good path up from Barrisdale Bay. Although a long hot pool, I should say, I've worked up a bigger sweat than a sun reader sitting an IQ test. But this has got us here now to Corrie Gorachel, a beautiful corrie, from where you get a view of that fantastic ridge leading to the Munro Larven, which you can just see is the dark peak behind me. Now, a few years ago, Knoydart was rather controversially up for sale, and the Ministry of Defence nearly bought this piece of land. Luckily, that didn't happen, so we don't have squaddies using butterflies as target practice. Instead, this piece of land was bought by the John Muir Trust, who are dedicated to retaining wild land without interfering with the livelihoods of the people who live here. Thank heavens, because this is a fantastically beautiful and tranquil spot. The first section of the ridge is a straightforward grassy walk, but just before the summit of Stobbish Errichel there comes a daunting and rather intimidating buttress. The path isn't much more than a series of linked ledges zigzagging through the outcrops of rock. It's even scarier than it looks. That was so frightening. That was really frightening. Don't believe any mountaineering books that might say the exposure some might find daunting. You'll find it absolutely petrifying unless you've a great head for heights. However, we're here now, attained the top of Stobbish Errichel. I have no fingernails left, and let's see what we get in reward for that. Well, behind me, the other side of Loch Awe, you can just see Ben Scriel. It's a bit hazy today, but the keen eye can pick out the Munro. The saddle is across there in the South Glenshiel Ridge. And here's some of the other Munros of Knoydart. That's Lugnabin behind me, not pronounced Lunibin, tempting as it may be to do so. Behind it in silhouette is Sgurr, just out with the rough bounds of Knoydart, although I'll bet it doesn't lose sleep over it. That's Mialbury over there. And this glen continues down towards Inverie, where you can cross to and fro from Mallaig. Hopefully we'll see Loch Nevis when we get to the Munro. But this is the ridge we're about to do. I'm so sorry, I must be suffering from heat exhaustion. I'll cut that out later. Ridge walking in Knoydart used to be the stuff of hill walking legend. To say you'd done the Larven horseshoe meant you were made of sterner stuff than the average rambler. But the wide path that now snakes along these savagely beautiful crags is testimony to the fact that access to Knoydart is getting not only easier, but increasingly more popular. It's still hard going though, and you certainly won't find any day trippers and stilettos up here. So if you meet a fellow hill walker at all on your long day, you know they've suffered like you have to get this far. Strangely enough, although we've been walking for hours, the top of Larven seems to be miles away. It's at this point, just beyond the peak of Stobbish Errichel, that we turn to the west and traverse what must surely be the final ridge of the summit. It's easy as you stroll along to forget that the north face of this ridge is absolutely sheer. It's a magnificent cliff, absolutely terrifying from the bottom, but quite stupendous from the top if you dare look over. But it's also worth remembering if you get lost up here in the mist at all that there's magnetic variation in this mountain. The rock has that effect, so your compass may not work. So if you do find yourself in thick mist up here, try to keep to the south side of the ridge just for safety's sake. The top's in cloud just now, but it's patchy, and I'm absolutely confident it'll clear when we get there, because we deserve it. We've walked so far. And misty conditions at this section of the walk are no joke. Just because the ridge is wide doesn't mean it's safe. There are some drops in the ledges that would make the strongest legs quake. Of course, that's what makes this mountain so exciting, but it's take incredible care, especially if you plan to conquer it in winter. Cornices of snow build up here in the wind that conceal the real edge of the ridge. But at long last, after almost 2 full days of effort, we're at the top of Larvin. This must be one of Scotland's most spectacular viewpoints. From up here, as well as the wild splendour of Knoydart itself, we also enjoy an uninterrupted view of the entire northwestern seaboard. What a cairn to drop your rock onto. Let me tell you, the exhilaration of having bagged the top is seriously diminished by the fact we have a huge descent down this ridge now and then a 6-mile hike back to Kinloch Awe to pick up the cars. This is a seriously big hike, and don't forget that should you set out to do it.